Ave Maria, welcome back to No Apologies. So we continue with our proofs of Christ's claims to divinity. We're moving on to our second point, which is that Christ proved himself to be God through his wondrous works. And this is going to break down also into 2 points, his miracles and then his resurrection. And today we're going to deal with just his miracles. So a true miracle is an event produced by God which is out of the ordinary course of nature. And when we can establish that these kinds of extraordinary things are actually happening, meaning that there's no fraud or trickery involved, and that God is the author, then we can say that we have a true miracle. And if we have a true miracle, then we're forced to say that God's finger is here. We have to admit that he approves the doctrine and testimony of which he worked this miracle. And that's what we want to do with Jesus Christ. We want to show that the miracles that he worked were actual miracles. They were historical realities. The blind really did receive their sight. The lepers were cleansed. The lame were cured. The dead were brought to life. And the wind, the sea, and the devils all obeyed his word. And then that the power by which he wrought these miracles was from God, so that we can say that Jesus Christ worked true miracles. And if he worked true miracles, then God approves the doctrine which Jesus taught. And the doctrine at the very center is that he is God. So we can then say his miracles are indeed a proof of his divinity. So we begin with the historical truths. There can really be no question about the historical realities of his wonderful works. He performed them in public, sometimes before hundreds, even thousands of people. Many of the miracles that he worked were verified by third parties, ruling out the idea that the people who were recipients of these miracles were in cahoots with our Lord. We think of the parents of the man born blind in the Gospel of John, who testified to the Pharisees that indeed, yes, this is our son, and he was born blind, and we don't know how now he stands before us with his sight. And the cured lepers who were sent back to be investigated by the very priest who had declared them to be unclean. And we also can think of the mourners of the daughter of Januarius, who were convinced beyond any shadow of a doubt that the young girl had indeed died. So we also point out that not all the witnesses to our Lord's miracles were his friends, and many of the people who saw them would have liked nothing more than to expose him as a fraud, as one performing tricks or illusions. But even his enemies couldn't deny the powers that they saw. During his trial, they never once said that he was a fraud. They said that he cast out devils by the prince of devils, but they never denied the fact that he cast them out. They believed that he raised Lazarus from the dead, and they never denied that fact. Even in their consultations, they simply came to the conclusion all the more that he must die, and also Lazarus, because so much attention was being brought to that miracle. So there really can be no doubt of the historical reality of the things which Christ performed. So what about then the cause of these miracles? Can they be known to be truly beyond the powers of nature, or did Christ possess some kind of secret natural power or knowledge which gave them the ability to perform these works? Well, we can look again at the raising of Lazarus from the dead. Certainly it's beyond the power of nature to raise the dead to life. Nature can be said to preserve life or to prolong life, or even can be said to give life, but it can never give life to a corpse. It can never create life where one's life has ended. And never could it ever be done just by command of a voice, which is what our Lord did. Lazarus, come forth, and the dead was brought to life. We can also look at the man born blind in the Gospel of John. The fact that he was born blind is evidence that his situation was not brought about by any kind of nervous disorder or autosuggestion or hypochondria, and that brought about just kind of a temporary blindness, which, as some say, could have been dispelled just by a sudden arousal of faith or hope. The fact is, in the Gospel of John, the man born blind didn't even know who Jesus was when he felt the clay being put on his eyes. And besides that, it's absolutely physically impossible for a man's sight to be restored just by a combination of dirt, spittle, and ordinary water. So we say that Christ's works were absolutely beyond the power of nature. But if beyond the power of nature, how can we be sure that they were from God rather than, as his enemies claimed, from the devil? Well, first we have Christ's own defense, that a house divided amongst itself can't stand. Second of all, we'd point out the personal character of Christ, that he was not a liar. And on a number of occasions, he himself testifies as to the source of his works. Again, the Gospel of John, chapter 5, verse 36 and 37. But the testimony which I have is greater than that of John. For the works which the Father has granted me to accomplish, these very works which I am doing bear me witness that the Father has sent me. And just a little bit further in the 10th chapter, verse 37, we read, If I am not doing the works of my Father, then do not believe me. But if I do them, even though you do not believe me, believe the works, that you may know and understand that the Father is in me, and I in the Father. Thirdly, because of the character of the miracles, these miracles were works of goodness and kindness, worked out of a genuine concern and pity towards his fellow man. And fourthly, because of the fruit that these works had on men of good will. They raised men's minds to God through acts of faith and hope, and they submitted their hearts to the laws of the Creator. So we can conclude then that Christ's miracles were indeed true miracles, historical events brought forth only through the power of God. And then we can say that these miracles are a proof of God's approval of Christ's doctrine. And since at the heart of that doctrine is that Christ is God, we can say that his miracles are certainly a proof of Christ's divinity. Thanks for joining me here on No Apologies. Ave Maria.